Hello everyone. I'm Robert Summercrast. I'm Dean of the Pamplin College of Business, Virginia Tech's Business School. I want to welcome you to an alumni spotlight for the 50th reunion of the class of 1970. Today we're joined by John and Phyllis Thompson. They're a dual alum couple with 3 degrees between them from Virginia Tech. Phyllis earned a master's degree in 1973, and John completed an economics degree in 1970 and an MBA in 1972. Now, John and Phyllis, this is a special year for you. Not only is it your 50th reunion year, but it's also your 50th wedding anniversary. So congratulations. I'm sure everyone watching congratulates you as well.
That's a long time.
Long time.
Well, I always see you smiling, so I know it's been a good time too.
Yes.
Well, before I ask you about some of your memories and some of your insights, I just want to spend a minute and take you back, and especially take alumni back, to think about what it was like around the year 1970. What sort of an environment was it for students at Virginia Tech, or what sort of an environment was the country? And I know you'll remember it was a pretty turbulent time in our nation's history. We had people calling for equal rights for African Americans, more rights for women, for other groups. It was also a time of important events in culture, technology, and I'd say adventure. We did have protests against the Vietnam War across the country, including many on college campuses. Instead of landing on the moon, we had an oxygen tank explode in 1970 on Apollo 13, and America almost lost all 3 astronauts on board. We were beginning to focus on the environment. That was the year that the US started the Environmental Protection Agency. The Beatles broke up. A big cultural and musical event for us. The age for voting in the US, with the rise of a youthful population, went from 21 to 18 that year. And for people thinking about the economy, a gallon of gas cost us about 36 cents. So some very different times. So I want to now ask you for some insights as we approach the 50th reunion of John's 1970 graduation. So, John, I understand you've been married for 15 years, but I think you and Phyllis have known each other a lot longer than that. Tell us how you met.
Well, actually, we met when I was just 12 years old. I had a neighborhood friend. We had a Little League baseball park that was near us, and for some reason he challenged John to a foot race to my house, and they appeared at my front door, but still did not date one another until John was a freshman at Virginia Tech, and I was a sophomore at Mary Washington College, and that is how we met and eventually dated one another.
Wow, that's great.
Yeah, so that's how we met.
Well, let me ask you about going to college then. So when it was time to go to college, John, you went to Virginia Tech, and Phyllis, you were off to Mary Washington. So how did you make those choices? What was it about the institutions that appealed to you?
Sure. Well, I'll start first. My Mrs. Blackwell, I think, was our career counselor, college counselor at a high school, Halifax County High School, where we were both enrolled. After talking to me, she thought I should only apply to 2 places, University of Virginia and to Virginia Tech. So unlike many students today, where you apply a lot of places, I applied to 2 places. I visited both campuses, and I got, Virginia Tech did not have early admissions at the time, but UVA did, and I was accepted early admissions at Virginia. But I decided to go to Virginia Tech primarily because it had a better feel to me for what I thought college was going to be like. Of course, I didn't really know, but what I thought college was going to be like. So I went to, I selected Virginia Tech over the University of Virginia based on just because my campus visit, it felt like a place I'd like to go to school. more than University of Virginia at the time.
I was also accepted at Mary Washington, and so I went to Mary Washington, which at that time was the women's division of the University of Virginia. I don't know when exactly, but the University of Virginia did not have women's sports at the time. So in order to continue, as they were receiving funds for their sports, they had to provide women's sports. So they took Mary Washington under their wing so that they could have women's sports. So at that time, we were actually, the formal name was Mary Washington College of the University of Virginia. So that's why I went to Mary Washington. I'm so very glad I did.
Oh, that's great.
That's my story.
That's great. Well, I want to ask you about some of your favorite memories and think about memories from Virginia Tech, things you did on campus together. Were there events or traditions, things that stand out? I know, John, you had a lot to do with the ring dance, maybe games, concerts. What stands out?
Sure. Yes, since Phyllis was dating Phyllis, and we dated probably, I think, as I recall, sometimes after Christmas, my freshman year, we started dating, and we pretty much, dated exclusively until we got married. So for about three and a half years, and so Phyllis would come down to Tech, to Blacksburg for concert, weekends. So formals. I was a member of the German club, and at the time, the German club and the Cotillion club had, spring and winter formals, fall, spring, and winter formals, 3 sets actually. And she came down to those. So they were positive memories, in terms of, I was with the student union, and we helped book live acts into that. And so I was responsible for trying to get some of my favorite bands for our formals. And then Phyllis would come down, of course, and it was always sort of a black tie, cocktail dress kind of a thing. So they were a lot of fun. Those weekends were a lot of fun. And also, I was a student senator in student government for, I was elected my freshman year. I later served as vice president of student government, but that was fun to be involved with student government affairs. And then the other was, I was chairman of the ring committee at Tech, which has always been a long tradition at Tech. And that was a lot of fun, that whole process of designing, bidding the ring, and presenting the ring to the class. And we had the first women's ring. We had a cocktail ring, but we had a women's ring for, in 1970 was, as I recall, the first year we had that. So, Phil, what were your memories about Tech at the time?
Oh, I enjoyed it. It seemed like it became an event place rather than a school, because every time I went there seemed to be either a concert or a dance or a big football game. I guess I actually remember the football games more than anything else. And I happened to be I took a couple of art history classes as part of my history study. And I think it's the stadium that has the flying buttresses on the outside of it.
The Castle Coliseum.
Oh, Castle Coliseum. And that's one of the big things that we were studying at the time in art history. And so I was always fascinated by the flying buttresses.
John, you were sort of unusual as a student in that you had a car on campus. You want to tell us about your car?
Yeah, it was interesting. My dad was a small Chevy dealer, the tiniest of which could not even exist today because the economics wouldn't make sense. But they sold about 250 vehicles, cars and trucks a year. A large dealer will sell that many, literally will sell 200 vehicles in a week, a large metropolitan dealer, leasing, et cetera. But anyway, so part of my graduation gift from high school was, I will give you it'll be the dealer's Corvette, but I will give you a Corvette to drive every year as an undergraduate if you don't get more than 1 B in any quarter. We were quarter system at the time. So good for me. I had a brand new Corvette every year. I was an undergraduate, which was very unusual. It wasn't based on my wealth so much, but my dad was buying the car at wholesale, letting me drive it. Then after I drive it a year, he would sell it and probably still make money on it. Because, I didn't put that many miles on it, and I kept it in good shape. And I found I was a freshman in Newman Hall, and just luckily I walked across the street and I saw a lady had a garage, and I asked if she used it, and she said, "No, I don't have a car anymore." I said, "Would you rent me garage space?" And she said, "Yeah, let me come in, let me get to know you." So the entire time I didn't park. There was parking across from Lane Stadium at the time, where everybody that had a car parked. So it's a long walk. Plus, it gets very dirty, and you don't have any security there really. And I had my Corvette parked in a garage across the street from the dorm for the whole time, which is another very unusual thing. So I kept out of trouble. I never got a ticket, but other than Phyllis said, except for her. So otherwise, I kept generally out of trouble having a Corvette. But I've always been sort of high interested in cars since I grew up, in my dad's dealership.
Oh, that's great. Well, you started talking about some of the things that have changed. Phyllis, you talked about the size between Mary Washington and Virginia Tech and how that's even changed now. So how has Virginia Tech changed? And I think your classmates watching this might be especially interested in hearing how you think the undergraduate experience has changed from when you were an undergraduate, John, and what you might imagine undergraduates are experiencing today.
Yeah. Well, Phyllis mentioned there were no computers. The PC was not introduced by IBM until 82, 83, as I recall. So, probably 12, 13 years after we graduated was the first personal computer, believe it or not. There were hobby level computers like Atari and some other people had, but a real personal computer was introduced by IBM with Microsoft's operating system back in 82, I believe. But so you didn't have mobile devices. Phyllis and I have iPhones, but it's interesting. If you think about a phone today, the iPhone or an Android phone, a Samsung phone, whatever, has 8 billion transistors with a B, 8 billion transistors in this. So these are extraordinary devices on almost any level we couldn't even imagine. When I was growing up, I remember having a 1 or 2 transistor radio, a little AM radio that worked, with the small battery in the back. It was just a little AM radio, not a very good one, horrible speaker. But there was 1 or 2 transistor, I think was the FM model. You get AM and FM. But today, to think there are 8 billion transistors on your mobile device, and we have this instantaneous communication, we have the ability to video conference with each other at a moment's notice, whether you use FaceTime with Apple or whether you use Zoom or whatever, Skype, whatever, Google Hangouts, whatever you'd like to use. It's just amazing. So I think we were less distracted. We may have been distracted by dating, drinking, going to fraternity parties, football games, whatever, but we were less distracted on a minute-to-minute basis than I think students are today, my hunch is. And you have this amazing research tool, which you can get to virtually every document in the, Library of Congress.
When I finished school and started teaching, about the third year I was teaching like a 6th grade, and I had children who couldn't read in 6th grade. And that's why we were in Blacksburg, why I went back to school to get a master's degree, because I didn't know what to do. I was just stymied. I said, I don't know, nothing prepared me to know how to work with this. And that's why I went back and started taking classes at night, because I wanted to figure out how to help. There was no going to the computer or my only resource was to go back to college and try and get this knowledge. So.
But Phyllis, when you went back, and so you were a student at Virginia Tech, was there maybe a professor who stood out to you?
Oh, Absolutely. Cherry Houck.
Cherry
I
Houck?
think it was called special education then, but Cherry Houck was teaching. Uh, she was interested in the field of it was called learning disabilities now. Then I mean, and she became my advisor, and she was just marvelous, marvelous. She we she just sort of introduced me to this whole idea of how the brain, how children learned in different, just completely different manners, and how they could still be very intelligent. In fact, maybe in some instances, very, very intelligent. But because um, each teacher taught, you know, to one spot, and in learning, there were all these children on the perimeter who weren't there and couldn't learn that way. And I, you know, as a master's thesis, she had me do a study of the literature because no one really even knew about learning disabilities. So that we had at least a picture that we could present to teachers about what it was and what people all through the field were saying. Of course, I had just as much information that said, nah, this is not true. This is, you know, and then of course people who said absolutely positively. And, you know, it was almost just a culmination of things, you know, just searching and searching and searching, which is what I did, and which was great for me as I went on to, you know, to teach. But Cherry Houck was great. I had Tom Sherman was great. Just really everyone that I had. I actually worked on my degree nights and sometimes because I continued to teach.
Yeah,
So,
it's interesting. It's just a satellite. She may not want me to say this, but Phyllis was in high school. We had, I don't know, 360 some students in a senior class. So it was a large rural consolidated high school in Virginia in Halifax County. Phyllis was, I think, voted most intellectual in her class. And then when she got to tech and got under the guidance that she happened to get some obviously gifted instructors, coaches, and mentors with Cherry Houck and Tom Sherman, I think primarily she became a total straight A student. So again, like she was in high school, you're virtually a straight A student. I think she may have gotten a B or something in French once or something. But in any case, she became a straight A student again. So I think it speaks to focus in your life, and all of us go through cycles of having more focus or less focus.
John, so Phyllis got the right mentor, the right teachers.
right.
How about you? I mean, you've certainly been successful.
I would say as an undergraduate, Dr. Charles Holloman was the person that got me sort of turned on to org psych in the field at the time. The term is not used much anymore, organization development. So it was the application of behavioral science to organizations, to businesses. I was less interested in accounting, finance. I was probably sort of interested in marketing, and I had another mentor, Dr. Ed Mazie at the time, that was head of the marketing department. I think he later went on to become the dean at Seton Hall. But those two were probably the most active, and I became interested. I did some consulting work with Dr. Holloman. And he did a lot of work with municipalities, counties, and cities around the state. And actually, I used to travel with him and actually learned from somebody who was an extraordinarily effective group facilitator. So I picked up a lot of early skills from him because he was very effective at doing it. So I got a chance to see somebody doing what a practitioner would do in organization development versus just reading about it.
So, John, you majored in economics before your MBA. I'm wondering, what were your career aspirations back then?
Yeah, strangely, I thought I wanted to go into banking, which would have probably been a disaster for me. Not because I couldn't be successful, I just don't think I would have loved it. And I remember every time I got on an airplane I flew to Atlanta to have an interview as an undergraduate with the Federal Reserve Bank of Atlanta to be an analyst. And I didn't get offered the job, so thank God I did not. because I think I would have not liked it. Even though I probably, mentally could have done it, I just don't think I would have liked it as it turned out. But I originally started at Tech because I was an electronic hobbyist, and I started in Double E. And the head, I've forgotten the head of the Double E department at Tech at the time was my advisor. And at the end of my freshman year, I changed to economics. So sophomore year, I moved to economics, and I had all A's in Double E. And he said, "What are you doing?" And I said, I am absolutely gutting through the math in Double E, and I know everything's built on top of this. I'm in trouble. He said, "But you're getting all A's." I said, "Yeah, I'm just barely gutting through it, right? I'm dying there." So I switched over to economics, and right away I met two very influential professors, Paul Craig Roberts, who later became a fellow at the Brookings Institution, I think before he retired. He was a political economist. And then I think by my junior year, I had a course with Paul Buchanan and Gordon Tullock, both Nobel Prize winners in economics that had moved from UVA to Tech to teach political economy, economic policy. And I had those two, and they were probably the two most rigorous academic professors I had at Tech. I got straight A. I remember my first day with Paul Tillich and whatever the course was. I've forgotten what it was at the time, but he asked me about an assignment that I had probably marginally prepared for, and he invited me out of the room to go do my homework. So needless to say, after being totally embarrassed, I remember what he said: "Mr. Thompson, it's not at all obvious that you prepared for today's session. I encourage you to go back to your dorm and be prepared for the next class." So he asked me to leave. So needless to say, I was prepared after that. But I'd say Paul Buchanan and Gordon Tullock.
Is there some advice that you would give yourself if you could go back and give the 1970 or the late 60s you advice? Anything?
Yeah, I would say your major is not necessarily your career. And Phyllis and I both believe that as an undergraduate especially, and that's why we are very favorable towards, strong liberal arts foundation, whether you get a liberal arts degree or not, but to have a strong liberal arts foundation is to get breadth early on so that you can have a grasp, a frame of reference for everything else you study. Early on, I sort of struggled because I had not given enough thought to really what I wanted to do. And I think everybody struggles what I want to do. And everybody asks you that too. So you feel compelled to give some answer, right? It's like when you're in high school, what do you think you want to be when you grow up? And, and it's a tough question, and it's probably a nonsense question because you don't know yet. Some people do know. I want to be a doc. I want to be a radiologist. I want to be an auditor. I want to be something. I want to be a teacher. So if you know that, great. But I must admit, I had no clue. And Phyllis, I think, was much more focused, and she found a huger level of reward from teaching children. And she became really a master teacher. And the year we left Tech to move to the corporate side of the world, when I moved to Tulsa to work for the Williams companies, and she left, I think, as I mentioned to you guys earlier, Maurice actually, in a conversation we had last week, that Phyllis was head of the Teachers Association, which in the state of Virginia is the right to work state. There weren't unions. She was head of the teachers union, believe it or not. And she taught learning disabilities in a rural high school in Shawsville. And she was voted the outstanding educator in the county, in Montgomery County, that year we moved to Tulsa. So the odds of that happening, we should have bought lottery tickets, because that falls into that's not going to happen category. But I think it shows you she was really a master teacher and very effective. But she found something she was really good at. And I think sometimes you have to experiment to find out what that is. And it's not so obvious necessarily from what you study. It could be, but I think it's not obvious to a lot of people.
It sounds like good advice for the old John, but also good advice for students today.
Yeah, no, I think, yeah, my belief it is. And I also think another piece of advice is don't underestimate the impact of luck in your life. Finding a spouse, a life partner, or finding something that you really find rewarding, because it may take some trial and error along the way, because sometimes it's not totally obvious. Culture's a fit, you know, a lot of things have to click to make it a great fit for you.
John and Phyllis, you've given back to the university with your treasure. You're certainly giving back with your time. In the last Virginia Tech campaign, you were the leaders of our Northern California effort for that campaign. You were able to achieve triple the financial goal that we had. So thank you. I mean, that's just amazing. More recently, you chose to support a new initiative in Pamplin, the undergraduate teaching assistant initiative we call Engage. And for our alumni who aren't familiar with it, you two were one of the very first supporters. It's a program that we started during this time of the pandemic when it's harder to have interaction. And so we hired over 100 undergraduates to be teaching assistants, not just to do the traditional things, but to really help bring together the students and the faculty in terms of communicating. So sometimes the students feel more comfortable telling a problem. Maybe it's the professor's boring, who knows, but talking to another student who can then bring that to the professor in a more, I don't know, not tied to an individual so much, a more anonymous way. I'm wondering if the two of you could talk a little bit about why you chose to support Engage. Why did this resonate with you?
Sure. Well, I'm going to let Phyllis start with that, because I think, to me, it goes back to her experience, which she had with Tom Sherman and Cherry Houck, in terms of how do you increase the engagement, you know, the program's name Engage, but how do you increase the contact, the overall richness of the experience, that, you know, even if you have a hybrid, some parts in class, some, or it could be all on, you know, all online, or some hybrid version of that, having students that can help take some of the administrative load off, it much more likely enhances the capability you're going to be able to make that contact. But
well, I think actually it's something, regardless of COVID or whatever, it should happen all years for all teachers to have that type of assistance when they're teaching. And I'm looking at it from my viewpoint as a teacher. I think the best years that I taught school was in Tulsa. I taught at a private school, and I had a full-time assistant, and it completely opens up your ability to be much more creative, to be able to focus on maybe a very gifted student, or to be able to focus on a student that's behind, or to be able to focus on bringing something or someone into the classroom that, you know, to add to the experience that you just would not have had time to do if you've been doing it alone. So it's just overall an excellent idea, no matter what is going on outside of the classroom. It almost was no reason not to support it, because it's a great idea. I think John and I both said, you know, our expression is a no-brainer. Of course, you help.
Yeah.
Really.
Yeah. Rob, you've always, I think you're sort of intrigued with quotes as we are, but it's still said no-brainer, but which is a classic. But the other thing is, you know, a good idea doesn't care who has it. If you run into a good idea and said, gee, why didn't I think of this before? Why didn't we think of this before? And it's just interesting sometimes that circumstances push you to push maybe an old idea to the forefront and said, let's try it. So we're very intrigued of how things work out this semester, and I've communicated with, I think, the profs that are involved in finance, and I think all the students have emailed us. saying thank you for supporting the program, but I've asked them to give us the feedback on how they thought it worked out.
We will be sure they do that.
Yeah, sure.
John, you're sort of shifting towards retirement now. I'm wondering what you're focused on now, or what both of you are focused on. What are your priorities?
My son and his wife live in Minneapolis, and my daughter lives in Los Angeles. But the reality is, even though I cut back about half time in January of 19, we haven't been able to travel very much. We've done no travel at all since about the first 2 weeks of February. So with the pandemic. Otherwise, I've been investing. This is part-time. I'm investing about 6 private companies. One's public now, but private companies. 4 are located in the Valley. One's located in LA, and one's located in Buffalo, New York. And I'm an advisor. I make a financial investment, and other times in working with the CEO, I take and I prefer to take total equity. And rather than I take no cash compensation, so I'm buying equity in these companies. So that's of interest to me. So I think it's a sort of a natural way to leverage a lot of my contacts and knowledge to entrepreneurs. And I've had an opportunity to work with a lot of great entrepreneurs, from Steve Jobs to Larry Ellison to Bill Gates to Michael Dell, and many, many others. But they're ones that everybody will recognize, but I've had an opportunity to work with them and learned a lot. So I'm trying to apply all those lessons to making some investments for a family and for a nonprofit foundation.
Wow, sounds like some great things to do. A lot of fun.
I've been retired for a long time, but I worked very hard raising children and raising John and such. I still do spend hours in my garden because, I've got a full acre full of all sorts of trees and plants and so forth. I think John and I don't think we understand the word retirement. We just keep going and going and going. I think we finally made a decision to stay in California and to stay in this house, although it's much too large for us. It's home, and home is home, So I think we're going to remain here, and that's been a major decision for us. We'll continue with our dogs, golden retrievers, because we really, really enjoy being in their company. And we'll see what happens. I think we're looking for luck. We always thought we would like to give back if that opportunity, and to whatever degree that we could. If nothing else, we thought maybe we would give back in time. If we could financially, we would. And Virginia Tech and Mary Washington seemed to be one of the areas. We always thought maybe it would be more in helping with dogs, that type of thing. And we still may do that. But education seems to have been where we sort of settled, interestingly enough.
Great. Well, the true spirit of Prosim.
Being an adult, lifetime learner is something I think everybody in the back of their mind would like to do. And I think so far, up until our early 70s, we want to continue, but I think we've been lifelong learners and kept ourselves very current, and in terms of what's really going on, and really realizing whatever the future is, it ain't what it used to be, right? Quote unquote. The future ain't what it used to be. It's not what we've experienced in the last 50 years. I think this pandemic, everybody believes that change has accelerated maybe 5 to 10 years of things that we saw on the horizon, but are now happening very near, either currently or happening very near term, in terms of where we work, how we go to school, how we learn. And we still think the value of a college education and graduate education is immense. It's extraordinarily high leverage.
Speaking of giving back, is that John, you're on the 50th reunion committee this year. Can you tell us what you've got planned, or what the committee has planned for the class of 1970? And
we postponed our reunion to probably the September, October of 2021 next year, which hopefully will have some robust vaccines available. But we still felt as a group that we'd like to have something that was focused on rekindling friendships that from when we were undergraduates, and we could do that better if we had a singular event, planned event. So it's going to be planned around a football weekend, but and I think a lot of people are interested. Quite honestly, my interest lies less there. I think Phyllis's does too, even though we enjoy going to games. I think that's not the reason to travel across country to go to a reunion weekend. But I think, meeting classmates, rediscovering the campus, a lot of things have changed. And then probably getting access to some of the faculty on the campus. For instance, one of the things I suggested is that we have Laura Sands, Dr. Laura Sands, the president's wife, who is a level of expertise in aging, in gerontology specifically, to have her speak about one of our favorite topics, living and working in an age of longevity. But to have some topics like that, have experts at Tech speak to those issues and have us discuss it. I think there was a lot of interest in our planning calls of doing something like that as a part of not just having it a social party experience, so to speak, but to have a lot more content to the reunion weekend.
Well, it sounds like you got some great ideas for the reunion, so I'm sure a lot of people are looking forward to that.
Sure.
John, Phyllis, I think I always enjoy spending time with you. And while you're out in California today and we're connecting over Zoom, I'm here on campus in Blacksburg, and we've got alumni who knows where around the world watching this. So thank you for your time. Always a pleasure. And for alumni from the class of 1970, we're looking forward to seeing you at the 50th reunion. So hopefully you'll be here on campus in not that much longer.
Thank you.
And,
We're looking forward to it.
Yeah, great.
Very much so.
all right. Thanks a lot.
Okay.
Bye.